Hello, you're watching / listening to the McAllister Hours. I'm your host, Cole McAllister. Very honored today. We're joined, graced with the presence of Rick Stewart, the candidate for governor in Iowa for the Libertarian Party. How are you doing today, man?
Pretty good. Glad to be out in this nice chilly April. What is it, 15th or something?
Yeah,
halfway through the month, and I haven't seen any flowers yet. I guess they come next month.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the good weather to come back. You know,
I got some good news for you though.
What's the good news?
Well, on the way from my house to my car this morning, I checked, and the asparagus is up.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So it won't be long.
Wow. Do you go? My ex-wife's family, they dug for asparagus. That was kind of their thing. They would go and do you do that?
I just have it in my backyard, so
Okay.
I just cut it off after it comes up
cool.
and take it inside and cook it and eat it.
Yeah, asparagus is great. You know, and that's that's the vegetable that really kind of goes with anything. You know, and kind of
to be honest, I find it hard to get around to cooking it because I can just eat it raw.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you know, if you just go by every day and there's a few sprouts up, you snap them off and that's it. You eat the asparagus and then you have to wait till tomorrow.
Damn. Well, yeah, like I said, it's been a while since I've been in an area where, do that, but I would love to someday. You know, I would love to have a garden and do all that. Before I get too much further into this, let me ask you, what's some of your background? Like, where are you from originally and what got you into libertarianism and what you do?
We only have an hour, so I don't know. You want me to do a shortcut here? I'm from Iowa. I'm what I think fifth generation because my great-great-grandfather got here in 1853, and I've got grandkids, so that's 7. So we got 7 generations of pure Iowa. They like to say, you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. So I've had a chance to explore a lot of the world, not as much as I'd like to, but a fair amount of the world, and I've always come back to Iowa, even though I've lived outside of Iowa at various times. I'm about as Iowa as you can get. Sometimes I just shake my head and say, can't I be different? But it doesn't seem to work. I'm just an Iowa guy. And of course, as you get older, and I'm not very old, I know I look 59, but that's just my Match.com profile age. It's an out-of-date photo. And, I'm 70 years old, so I've been around long enough to see a lot of cycles and just about everything, really. War, peace, Democrats, Republicans, hate, love, drugs, liquor. I've seen just a lot of cycles. And so one of the cycles that I've seen is that I'm pure Iowan. I can't cycle out. So anyway, I was lucky. I grew up in a small town, Postville. My dad he wasn't a farmer. He was a voc ag teacher. So all of his students were farmers, and I got out on those farms a lot. But eventually my dad, even on a teacher's salary, moved from in town to a little 5 acres on the side of town. And we got 5 sheep, I think, or 6 or something. So that was pretty amazing. My brother and I were really young and had a lot of fun. And then he got 20 acres on the other side of town, a little bit further out. And that was sort of isolated. We were definitely not on the edge of town. We were in the country. But we weren't quite far enough away, so I still had to walk to school every day. It's like if he would have bought his farm a little bit further. But now we got 20 sheep. I guess it's 1 sheep per acre, something like that. And then we moved from there, and I grew up in the town of Maquoketa, which is a town, and it was a big regret of mine that we never got to live on the farm again. But then this sort of magic thing happened. I was a paper boy for the Des Moines Register because my dad believed in making his kids work, so he didn't have to give them money. And so I actually won a scholarship to go to a very famous, very old and rich New England prep school called Andover or Phillips Academy. And, my parents had never even heard of this place until I begged them to let me go because I got the scholarship. So for 9th through 12th grade, I went to this school on the East Coast. And, I will brag about it all day long because I graduated. And it's a great school. I had a fantastic time. But it's the kind of place where, some of the other people that went there were like George Bush. And then his dad, George Bush, also went there. They weren't there when I was there.
No.
But the little boy, the Jeb Bush that became the governor of Florida, he was there. I remember him. I knew him. He wasn't my friend. He was a couple of years behind me, but I certainly remember him because it was an all-boys school, and you remember all the famous boys that go there. Actually, you remember all the boys, including the infamous ones. But that was a very unique experience because I was going to school in the East Coast with a bunch of people who were, for the most part, rich and fancy and extremely smart. But I was still living in Iowa, where all my friends were just plain Iowans, and I had two sets of friends. I lived in two places, and that had a real impact on the way I think and the way I grew up and the way I got educated and my whole attitude towards life. Then I spent a year on the West Coast in a college. That was 1969 and 70, and I know you're too young to remember, but those were very critical years. In 70 in particular, was all the college campuses were erupt and protesting the war in Vietnam, and it was Earth Day, the first Earth Day, and classes ended early, and that's okay for me because I was sort of done studying anyway. But then I spent 2 years traveling in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. So I dropped out of college and had 2 years as a long-haired hippie traveling around all the way to Nepal and Kathmandu, most of the time pursuing the hash trail. That's mostly the only thing we were doing was just following the whole trail across like Morocco and then Lebanon and then Afghanistan and then all the way to Nepal. And, that was a great time, certainly both some of the heights and some of the depths of my life. But I came back from there, and 30 days later, I was a long-haired hippie in Nepal, smoking a lot of marijuana, and then 30 days later, I was a uniformed police officer in my hometown. Hey, what are you laughing at? Come on, gotta tell this with a straight face.
That's crazy.
I was a uniformed police officer in my home state of my hometown of Makokata. So that was a pretty quick transformation, but I think it sort of defines the way I think about things. I've always enjoyed having one foot on both sides of the fence. I don't like standing on one side and wishing that looking at the grass on the other side and saying, oh, it's a lot greener over there, I want to jump the fence. If I think the grass is greener, I jump the fence, and I've done that enough times so that I'm like, well, it's very seldom it's greener on the other side. But I like to do both sides. I like to have a foot on the left and a foot on the right, and probably in just about everything that I do, I pursue. I don't want to call it balance because I think I'm more like a barbell. I'm imbalanced on both sides. But if you hold me in the middle, it's pretty good. I'm sort of a heavyweight on both sides too.
That's awesome. I can relate to that. Like, you kind of talking about like having a foot in both places. I think a lot of libertarians like a lot of commonality is like they have a lot of experience in different areas. Like you said, you had two different kinds of friends. Like I grew up in a small town as well, and now I live here and I've had other experiences in other places. And I think the people who tend to fall into the binary, like Republican, Democrat, are not all the time, but generally they don't, they lack those experiences a lot of times,
Yeah, if you can only see one side, usually it means that you're looking in the mirror and you really ought to open that door and look on the other side of the door.
Yeah.
It's not the same over there. And I find it extremely valuable to just to meet people that are completely different than me, completely different opinions than me, completely different background than me. I still enjoy that a tremendous amount. And I get very bored when I'm hanging out with people that are all the same.
Yeah.
They entertain you for a little while, and then I'm like, I've sort of seen this. maybe I'll go look somewhere else. Not that I don't like those people. I have friends from everywhere, but the people that excite me the most are the people that they love life and they're fairly educated. I don't mean they have to have a fancy degree so much, although that's okay too. But they do things. They just do things. They do things all the time, and they explore life. And I get along really well with people that are like that. Hopefully I'm like that. I try to be like that. I think most of the people that I admire are so far beyond anything I could ever dream of that I'm extremely jealous, and I just wish that I were able to develop like they did. But I just love life. I love being alive, and I love meeting people, and I love talking about things. And I love arguing, but I don't like fighting.
Yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah, no, I'm just not a fighter. I am a fighter. I'm a black belt taekwondo.
Oh, wow. Damn.
But you know what? It's so much fun to fight, but I like it when it's on the mat and there's rules in it. and you shake hands afterwards, right? It's like we're both feeling great. We can't move and we're bloody and everything else, but we're friends. And I don't like to fight with people who just want to fight. It's not any fun for me. No.
Yeah, I get that.
I really don't know that many people that are like that. I always hear about them. I see them on TV, or I read stuff that they've read. I'm like, wow, that guy's really radical. They just hate so many people, and they're so unhappy. And it's like, man, I don't know. I'd hate to be like that.
Yeah.
And then you meet them in person, and you realize, no, actually, they're not like that at all. That's their public persona.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that there's not very many people out there that we love to hate, that I wouldn't enjoy hanging out with, at least for a little bit.
Yeah.
I wouldn't drink more than one beer with Donald Trump. But, I'm not sure I'd drink more than one beer with Joe Biden either. I mean, Obama, hell yeah, I'd drink a six-pack with Obama.
That's good. But, it's good that you have like an open mind, and, there are a lot of people who would, on either side be like, what? What's going on? But I think, again, that's a commonality of libertarians, I think. Let me ask you this, like, why are you a libertarian? Like, why do you consider yourself that? What's the reason to you?
Well, I think I'm a little bit like a mountain climber on a ridge where, it's way up there in the heights, and it's cold, and it's icy, and it's dangerous, and you're trying to get across the knife edge of the ridge, and you look down to the left, and you go, holy crap, I can't fall down there. That's like, woo, I'm going to die. And then you walk a couple more steps, and you look down on the right, and you're just like, whoa, man, I can't go that way either. I would die if I was down there too. And so you have to stay on the ridge. The ridge is where you are, it's going to take you where you want to get to. And if you fall into that trap of republicanism or democratism, really, it's not a good place to be. I can't agree with at least half of what either of those two parties do. It's just anathema to me. And so I refuse to join organizations that don't represent something that I think is a path forward, and also that don't reflect the values of our founding fathers. People always think that the people that are dead must not have been very smart, like not as smart as me. I mean, those guys don't know anything. Look what I've learned. And actually, I sort of believe the opposite. I think that the greatest thinkers, like probably you got to go back at least to the Greeks, and I imagine there were some other ones that aren't so famous that I don't know enough about. But when you consider that we're still reading Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and stuff like that today, and that was written 2,500 years ago, you really have to scratch your head and say, is there something new since then? Do we know anything that they didn't know? And yeah, there are some things. We know some science that they didn't know. But there's been so many great thinkers, and then you just fast forward all the way to the founding fathers. And I don't make any apologies for the fact that they were fathers and not mothers. That's not my fault, so don't blame me that they were founding fathers. But they were just brilliant people.
Yeah.
And they had the time and the energy and the intellectual stamina to spend an enormous amount of time trying to create something without the kinds of pressures that we have today. They didn't have the daily or the by the hour news that broadcast everything and then allowed other people to gang up and yell and scream and disagree and fight and everything. I mean, they did fight. Look at the Federalist Papers. They fought like dogs and cats, but they also fought respectfully. And they created something that was actually pretty amazing. The American Constitution is an amazing document because they balanced all the stuff that they'd learned from history as well as they could. The first free country really in the world, and they put together a document that is incredibly insightful. So I think that all I really am is somebody who admires the founding fathers for their libertarian instincts. They carried at least as far as Iowa, because Iowa was pure libertarian state when it was formed in 1857. Well, just look at our state motto. It's pure libertarian. It's our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. That's Iowa. This was a libertarian state. They didn't have the word, but all of the aspects of libertarianism is what our Iowa founding fathers were fighting for. They were not fighting for what today's Democrats and Republicans are fighting for. They wanted freedom. They wanted responsibility. They wanted to live their life the way they wanted to live their life without somebody else telling them what they had to do or what they couldn't do. And that they built an entire state out of that. Okay, I admit it. We killed all the Indians. Back then they called them Indians. And we moved them out. Yeah, it's like absolutely atrocious. Fortunately, Iowa didn't have the sin of slavery to attach to us. But it's not like our forefathers and our foremothers were perfect in any way, shape, or form. I forgive people that are dead. Sorry, I can only blame people that are alive. People that are dead, I try to study their goods and their bads, and then take the goods and not take the bads from them. But yeah, Iowa's always been a very libertarian state, and in many respects it still is. I'm very confident that libertarians are the future of the whole planet, really, unless the Republicans and Democrats literally do succeed in destroying themselves the way that they appear to be wanting to do, because it is pretty amazing. If you're a libertarian, you can be proud, but it would be hard to be proud if you were a Democrat or a Republican, because they just behave so badly, right, as a party.
Yeah.
Now, as individuals, of course, we have crazy libertarians.
Yeah.
But as individuals, we have crazy everything. But as a party, the libertarian principles that are, 50 years old now, they stand up extremely well to modern society. They aren't old-fashioned at all.
Yeah, well, and the thing that attracts me to libertarianism is it's, unlike, Democratic, Republican values, it's not authoritarian. It's not saying you need to act like this. It's more of a, these are some basic fundamentals that, we should abide by as a society, and, not getting into things, too specific. You know what I mean? Yeah,
just respect your neighbor. Yeah. Basically, it's the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Which, interestingly enough, was my dad's favorite expression. It's funny. You grow up and you think your dad doesn't know anything, and he's old-fashioned and everything. But as you get a little bit older, you realize that everything he used to tell you to do makes a whole lot of sense. So that was one of them: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's libertarianism in essence. If you don't want somebody else to steal your stuff, don't steal their stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't want somebody else to hurt you, don't hurt them. And if everybody followed that, we wouldn't really need a government at all, would we?
Yeah, in theory. Let me ask you this: what's your start in, or what got you into starting in like libertarianism in terms of like political office and things like that?
Well, I was clearly a person who thought in libertarian ways without knowing even what a libertarian was, and I wasn't a joiner. I had a job, I barely paid any attention whatsoever to politics. I read a couple of magazines on a regular basis, the New Republic and the New Yorker, the Harper's, but that was sort of my total input. I've never been a TV guy. My dad didn't have a TV so I grew up without a TV. I was the only person in my town whose parents could not afford to buy a TV. Well, that's not what they said. That's what I thought. I was like, well, you can't afford to buy a TV. Are you kidding? Everybody in this town has a TV, and you're the poorest guy? But my dad just didn't like it. He didn't like TV. And it was a blessing. At the time, of course, I was not thinking it was a blessing. I thought it was a curse.
Yeah.
But I was blessed by not having a TV in the house. And I don't have a TV in the house today either. So, I grew up reading the newspaper, but then when it turned out that you had to pay to subscribe to it, I quit that. And I just read these magazines, and I had a job. So politics was a little, it was difficult to really get involved. I had opinions, but they weren't based on a lot other than maybe somebody else's opinion. But then I retired, and one of the things I promised myself was that I would quit reading magazines, and I would start reading books because, I had more time. And I did that. I pretty much quit reading magazines. I still subscribe to a few. But I started reading books, and I read a wide variety of books, but a lot of them are economics and history. I also read some fiction, but I prefer old fiction. I don't like to read anything that was written within the last 100 years, for the most part, with respect to fiction. And the more I read, the more I realized that my intuition was pretty good on a lot of stuff, and pretty bad on some other stuff. And, just by reading history and economics, it sort of led me towards libertarianism, because libertarians are sort of they're the party whose their economics is a whole lot better than the economics of the Republicans and the Democrats. I'm sorry, but the stuff that the Republicans and Democrats like to do just doesn't really hold up to good, solid economic analysis. And so the more you read and the more you learn, like, well, this sounds like a good idea, but whoops, it isn't a good idea, right? Like minimum wage would be a great example. It's like, well, that'd be good. I'd love it if everybody earned $15 an hour, except whoops, nope, it's really actually a very bad idea, especially if you want to raise people up. Okay, because the minimum wage pretty much has the opposite effect. That's just this economic thing that is pretty easy to understand if you work on it. But anyway,
maybe explain that for people, because that tends to be a thing that I debate with people a lot. Minimum wage, like explain more, like why, like what you were just saying, like why is it, why does it hurt people?
Well, presumably the purpose of a minimum wage is so that nobody has to earn less than that. Yeah. Which sounds honorable, except the problem is if you set a minimum wage which is above the prevailing wage, then nobody can get a job unless they're worth that. Because people are not going to hire you and pay you $15 an hour if you're worth $10 an hour. They just won't hire you. So that's what a minimum wage does. It's the people who don't get jobs. And by definition, those are the people you're trying to help.
Yeah,
that's who it hurts the most, is the people who don't get a job because they're not worth $10. Yeah, they're not worth $15 an hour. But it's really hard to count them. Where do you go and look and go, oh, that guy, he didn't get a job because he's only worth $10, and that guy didn't get a job because he's only worth $8, and she didn't get a job because she's only worth $14. You can't count them.
Yeah,
but they're there. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why you, like in a time like now, right, with minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Can anybody remember the days when a person used to work for $7.25 an hour? That's a long time ago.
Yeah,
because right now the minimum wage is pretty much close to 15. I mean, the prevailing wage. Just go to Quick Star and say, I'd like to come to work and I'd like $15 an hour. And they'll say, when can you start?
Yeah.
Well, that didn't happen because the government raised the minimum wage. That happened because the prevailing wage went up because there weren't as many workers as there were people who wanted to hire them. And so the wages they built up. That's a very natural thing. If you care about people who aren't worth minimum wage, and I do, let's just put this out here really easy.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't care about anybody who's above lower middle class. Okay, somebody has to be middle class and somebody has to be lower middle class. But when you go one step below that, like lower class, that's who I care about. I don't care about the millionaires. I don't care about the billionaires. I don't care about the 100,000-aires. I don't care about the people like me. I care about the people at the bottom. Everybody else is doing just fine. And I only want to implement policies that actually help the person at the bottom. I don't want to do these imaginary things that make other people feel good. Minimum wage is a feel-good policy. Makes people that are earning more than minimum wage feel good because, like, well, now everybody's going to get $15 an hour and I'll feel really good. Well, guess what? They're not going to get $15 an hour. They're not going to have a job, and you should feel bad for putting them in that position and taking work away from them. That's how you should feel, and that's how I feel when we implement policies that actually hurt the people at the bottom, because those are the only people that I care about.
Yeah.
Then I'm completely unequivocally opposed to that, and that's what a minimum wage is. There's ways to help the people at the bottom, but government, for the most part, has almost never implemented any of those ways. We have everything else. We have welfare for the rich. That didn't help the poor.
Yeah.
we have a social security system that rewards everybody that gets old and lives.
So let me ask you this, like in a libertarian society, and I think I kind of have an answer, but like, how would you help those people then? Like, you cut out the minimum wage, but there's still, this wide population of people who are really poor, and it's kind of, it'd be hard for businesses that have a high value to like decrease their value to, I think a way you could, donate. You could have institutions that do donations, but I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Well, a pure libertarian approach is you don't need to do anything, because if you just get the government out of the way, all those people at the bottom will still be at the bottom, but they'll be pretty well off. The way I like to put it is, if we just hadn't had the 20th century, they would be well off today. Okay, because the 20th century is where a lot of very well-meaning people decided that if there was a problem, the government could solve it. And so we started transferring income. We didn't used to transfer income. Transfers are just where I tax you and I give the money to somebody else. Okay, that's what we call income transfers. Voltaire, even before the American Revolution, like 1765 or something. And if you don't know Voltaire, you should at least read all of his quotes because he was one of the greatest quote producers of all time. He said, the art of government is to take as much money as possible away from one group of people and to give it to a different group of people.
Yeah.
Well, that was before the American Revolution. It's the same thing today. And if you just look at what the Republicans are trying to do, they try and tax the people that don't vote Republican, and they try and give it to the people that do vote Republican. And then when we switch, the Democrats try and take money away from the Republicans and give it to the Democrats. That's just what government does. So unfortunately, when the 20th century came around and they had the Great Depression, first it started the giving away money to people started with, unfortunately, shame for us, the first and only Iowa president, Herbert Hoover. The last great president was Calvin Coolidge, and he left office in 1928. And Hoover had been his vice president. He won, and so he had 4 years, and people blame him. What's really hilarious is when the Democrats claim that Hoover created the Depression. Well, I mean, really, the Depression had many causes. I don't think we want to go into it here, but Hoover was the ultimate engineer. That's what he was. He was the engineer. He was the richest man in the world.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a mining engineer. This guy that we all think of as a poor Iowa farmer was the richest man in the world, and he thought that it was the government's responsibility to solve every problem. It didn't make a difference if it was flooding, which is what he tried to solve. That's true. Okay? There was a big flood in the Mississippi River, and Hoover wanted to solve that. But anyway, he tried to implement all these programs for the government, and none of them worked, right? And then he got blamed for Hooverville in Washington, and Anyway, those were World War I vets who wanted to change the contract that they fought under. And if you don't know your history, these World War I veterans had been promised a pension, right? And they were given a pension, but they wanted more, so they all came to Washington demanding, we want pension. And Hoover said, well, no, you signed a contract, and we lived up to our half, so you should live up to yours. But anyway, I'll try to make this a little bit shorter story. I get carried away sometimes.
You're good.
But Hooverville made the front page, and then Hoover looked bad, and so he got roundly trounced by Roosevelt. Well, what Roosevelt did was he implemented every one of Herbert Hoover's programs, but with a different name.
That's classic.
It's like the magic trick. See the rabbit?
Yeah.
Whoa! Look
the
at
Patriot Act.
It's the Patriot Act. So basically, we turned into a society where, over the course of time, the 20th century, where the government tried to solve problems that they had no chance whatsoever of actually solving, and they made things worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And little by little, they changed the country into one where there are tremendous amounts of transfer payments. And I am coming around to the point. So if we hadn't had the 20th century, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have poor people in America. We really don't have poor people in America today. When you look at the whole world, there's nobody poor in America.
In kind of that context.
Yeah, but we'd be probably twice as rich as a country if it hadn't been for the 20th century and income transfers. So if you think about the United States being twice as rich as we are now, it means that the people at the bottom would also be twice as rich. And so, they really wouldn't be poor. We achieve that non-poverty now by income transfers. Okay, because the people at the bottom are not necessarily working. But they're getting money. Mm-hmm. And the people, of all stripes really are getting paid to do nothing. Like somebody who is old, like I am, I get paid to do nothing. I literally, thank you very much for coming to work every day, because you're paying me to do nothing, and I don't do anything, and I still get a check. So, I really appreciate it. I can't believe that you're so generous. I love it. Keep doing it. Keep working, because I love those checks. But I don't deserve those checks. What am I doing that says I deserve you to work and then I'll take your money? I don't. So anyway, That's the 20th century. We created a monstrosity, and now we have everybody that is dependent on government, and they think that good things can't happen unless government does it for them. But in actual fact, the libertarians believe that if the government got out of the way, like I said, we'd be twice as rich and we'd be twice as charitable, and everyone would be at least twice as well off. Not to mention that they'd have the individual freedom to do whatever that it is that they want to do, and they wouldn't be constrained by nonsense rules by the government. Okay, now. Here's my point. This is not a libertarian platform, and definitely you won't find this in any libertarian principles or libertarian platforms. But we've dug ourselves up this gigantic hole where everybody thinks that they deserve something for not doing anything. I'm poor, so you should give me some food, right? I'm poor, you should give me a house. I'm poor, you should give me health care. And a better answer is. Wow, here I get a chance to talk about another famous Iowa libertarian, the most famous Iowa libertarian, Charles Murray, widely despised because he wrote a book where he told the truth. Nobody wanted to hear the truth. That first book would have been The Bell Curve, and the last one I think was called Human Diversity. I'm sorry. But anyway, this isn't his original idea. In fact, I'm going to claim it was my original idea. Because when Bill Clinton was in office and Hillary Clinton was the first lady, I wrote Hillary a letter because I figured Bill wouldn't read it. I'm going to go one notch down, and I explained that universal basic income would solve this problem. And she didn't write back. I don't know. Maybe the letter got lost in the mail. You can't tell. It's the government entity delivers the mail, so you never know for sure. But Hillary Clinton, she didn't write back. But anyway, Charles Murray is a huge proponent, and he's also a lot smarter than I am, which pretty much half the world is. And so he spells it out a lot clearer than I, and is a lot better at explaining it. But he wrote a whole book on the universal basic income. Oh, and Andrew Yang, of course, in the last presidential election, that's what he proposed too. And I know Andrew, and I read both his books, and hopefully he's going to endorse me in this campaign because I'm a UBIer. But Charles Murray got it right, and Andrew got it wrong. And Andrew sort of had the wrong reasons. But it's still the same idea, and it's still a good idea. And that is, everybody gets a check. So I'm going to go with Charles Murray's plan. Everybody gets $13,000 a year just because you turned 18.
Damn.
If it's 21, I stand corrected because I always forget. But at some point in time, you get $13,000 a year. That's
interesting. I didn't think that universal basic income was a typical libertarian perspective.
Nope, it's not.
So I guess, okay, let me ask you this then. What kind of libertarian do you see yourself as?
I'm a pure libertarian.
Okay, like in relation to like anarchism or like, because like I
don't go for any of those labels. Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm just not a person who does a good job at looking at micro differences and figuring things out.
Okay,
so I'm a pure libertarian because I believe in pure liberty and I believe in pure freedom. But I also believe that we've dug ourselves a deep hole. And as a practical person, I want to get a ladder and climb out of the damn hole. So that ladder is not a libertarian ladder, but I'm not going to sit at the bottom of the hole and argue about whether I should be using climbing shoes or whether I should ask for a rope or it's like we need to get out of this hole. We're in this hole where everybody thinks that the government needs to solve every one of their economic problems for them, and that it has to be done for free. And I'm sorry, that's number one, it won't work, and number two, it won't be free. So let's do something that also isn't free, but it will actually work. Because if you write everybody in the United States that's 18 years old a $13,000 check, careful because you don't get one check. Okay, there's some restrictions here. But if you do that, then there won't be any poor people left in America except kids. All they have to do is wait until they're 18, then they won't be poor anymore. And actually, of course, I think most parents won't allow their kids to grow up in poverty anyway because the parents will have money. And I believe in that. I believe in fixing the problem. But I also believe that if you fix the problem in the long run, that would go away. People would go, this is not worth our time and effort. Everybody's already like pretty well off. And this transfer stuff, it's just sort of, we don't need that. We can be rich and free altogether. Because we are rich, okay? Yeah, we are rich.
So I guess let me ask you this: how would that affect inflation, though? Because I think that's kind of the backlash that we've had from the COVID checks and stuff, and that that wasn't universal basic income, but it kind of was in a sense in terms of the idea. It wasn't probably executed in the way that you're maybe thinking, but like there is kind of a question of like how that would affect inflation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. I love that experiment. Right? They just sent everybody a check. I mean, they didn't, because they said, "Oh well, you made too much money. You're not going to get a check."
And it was really, the balance was off. I mean, it mostly went to the corporations, so it wasn't really.
Well, yeah. Give me one step in between before I climb all over that, because that's part I hate. They gave everybody $1,200, but they didn't increase taxes. So you can't do one without the other. You can't like say, well, we'll give everybody money, but nobody ever has to pay for it. That's fraudulent. Okay, the government does not have the ability. No one has the ability to do that. Okay, I can promise you $1,000, but if I don't have the money, you're not going to get it. And if I write you a check for $1,000, it's gonna bounce when it comes back to me, and the government's check is gonna bounce too. So let's just stick with the $1,200, right? Well, yeah. Okay, so they sent you $1,200 and you felt really good, didn't you, for a day? Yeah. Maybe even after you put the money in the bank, and I don't know what you bought with it, but it's like, yeah, that felt good. I admit it, I liked it. Of course, I didn't spend it because I knew that I was gonna have to pay it back later in taxes, so I invested mine. But just do the math, okay? Just take the size of the stimulus and divide it by the number of people in the United States, and you realize that they spent, I think it was $5,600 to give you a $1,200 check, and wow. You're going to pay $5,600 in taxes for the benefit of getting a $1,200 check. Would you take that deal? No. Well, I wouldn't take it either. But we're going to have to do it. We're all going to pay for just the first check I'm talking about, not to mention the last two. We're going to have to pay 3 or 4 or 5 times as much back in taxes as we got. That's just the way economics works. It's math. It's not a political question. It's a pure math question. So, yeah, that was like a combination of a really good idea, which was universal basic income, with 2 really bad ideas, which is one, well, let's not raise taxes. And then number 2, well, let's not give most of the money to the people. Let's waste most of the money by giving it to local governments and state governments and corporations and best friends and buddies and the people that I drink with and my golfing friends. Because that's where it went. It certainly didn't come to us. I got $1,200 with a $5,600 bill.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the money? Where's the $4,400? Because that just got wasted, and there was no tax increase, and so yeah, of course there's inflation. Anybody could have said there was. I mean, when the government spends more money than it takes in, that's inflationary, every single time. It's Milton Friedman got a Nobel Prize for that. So let's acknowledge the fact that inflation is a monetary phenomenon.
That's interesting. So let me ask you this. So I'm registered as a Libertarian.
Yay, all right. Yeah. Here, let me congratulate you. Okay. I'm going to make sure you get into our honor roll too, okay? Because you're a Libertarian and you put me on the podcast. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the best there is.
Awesome. Hey, here it's on recording, so if you don't come through, I got you. Yep. No, I'm kidding. Me and Molly actually both voted for Joe Jorgensen last year.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. But I do have a question, because as a Libertarian, I still have my skepticisms of it. You don't consider yourself an anarchist, but a lot of people that I tend to listen to and interact with tend to side more toward anarchism, which is no government, no universal basic income, etc. I guess a couple things that I have questions with, of like how you would deal with these things in a society with little to no government. Things like nuclear weapons, and then there's kind of the idea of like legalized violence in a sense. If there's someone who is being malicious and, being violent towards people, like, I guess, what's your response to, some of those things, the general concerns that people may have for having no government or little government?
Well, if you start from where we're at and try and go to no government overnight, then probably you're going to find out that the people that have the nuclear weapons are even worse than the ones that currently have the nuclear weapons, because they're going to go out and, it's the troublemakers that are going to go out there and accumulate all of the troublesome things. Yeah. You can't go from here to there without going through the interim. Okay, so you have to like just clamp down little by little by little by little by little over the course of time until you can get to the point where there's no government. number one. So if you want me to fantasize about what the world would be like if we had never had a government, okay, well, then I think it would have been a very idyllic world.
Yeah.
I think that there wouldn't be any nuclear weapons. Who would you sell them to? You can't. The only one that you can sell a nuclear weapon to is a government or somebody who wants to be the government. And if there is no government and the world is an idyllic place, then who wants to be the government? How's it going to make me better? I've got everything I want. I've got all the peace and the love and the prosperity that I want. And why would what would I do with more of a perfect life? It would sort of squeezes out bad apples as opposed to one bad apple ruins the bunch. We do have a government, okay? I have no idea whether humankind could actually live in an idyllic, anarchic, no government society for any length of time. However, what I have read, and I don't study things. You have to remember, I'm not a student. I read, okay? And I steal other people's ideas. That's all I do. I just read. If it looks like a good idea, I steal it. If it looks like a bad idea, I leave it behind. I don't know. It looks to me like there's something in human behavior that may be biological and hereditary and genetic that will not ever allow us to live in an anarchic society in peace with the entire rest of the world. So the question is, how can we minimize government? And really the question is, how can we minimize the harm of government? Because government, by its very nature, is going to be political. And if it's political, you're going to find people arguing about it. And if you find people arguing about it that sort of get convinced of their own strong opinions, then very quickly you escalate into they're going to try and force other people to live the life that they think they should live. And once you get into the area where people are trying to force other people to live life the way they think they should live, then you have conflict. And it escalates, and eventually you have nuclear weapons, and you have war in Ukraine. So I can't claim that we could have perfection. I can claim that we can reverse this horrible trend that we've experienced ever since the 20th century of growing and growing and growing government and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking the private sphere and that's just, we can go backwards, and that's what we need to do. So my UBI requires that we eliminate Social Security, we eliminate Medicare, we eliminate Medicaid, we eliminate farm subsidies, we eliminate corporate welfare, we eliminate food stamps, Section 8 housing, everything that the government is currently doing to pretend to solve problems. We just eliminate that, and that's pretty much exactly as much money as you need to give everybody $13,000 a year. So I'm not increasing taxes. I'm keeping taxes the same. I'm going to just change the system. Now that's a leap too.
Yeah.
And Charles Murray comes right out and says, well, this isn't going to happen. But it's reasonable to think that we could do that, because if you just work through all the math for every single person, the farmers are going to be okay if they don't get a $250,000 corn subsidy check. Believe it or not, they're going to be okay. They can live without that. And the people that are seniors, they can live without it too, because the ones that are like me, I'll be right up front here. I get $3,000 a month. I'm sorry, I laugh every time I think about it. You give me $3,000 a month. I thank you so much for that. I hope all the listeners will understand that I am one of the most appreciative people in the world. I love each and every one of you that goes to work. I love my kids because they go to work. I love my nieces and my nephews. They go to work, and they go to work for me. And I love their checks, okay? Don't stop. But truth be told, I would be okay if all I got was my $13,000 UBI, right?
Yeah.
And so would everybody else. If we just switch the system from what it currently is, which is unworkable, and switch it to one that is a UBI, then there'd be a bunch of old fogies like me that would whine and complain and write our congressman, and we'd claim that I can't even eat anymore because that $3,000 check, I was getting my Cheerios with that. But the reality is, sorry, bud, 13's enough for you, and it's enough for everybody. If you want more, go to Walmart, be a door guy, and like greet people, and and hey, I can do that, so I'm going to do that if I have to, and everybody else will too. We already do that. The world works really well. We've just screwed it up. Government has made it so most people feel miserable even when they aren't.
I see.
That's a great accomplishment, isn't it? We've taken people that are actually happy, okay? Yeah. And we've made them all miserable. I mean, I'm miserable. I'm miserable when I read the news. and I see what the government is trying to do on both sides all the time. They've turned me into a miserable old man by passing laws that somebody else likes. And both sides are they're just trying to win a political game, and I don't like the game. So yeah, government has succeeded in making me miserable. And I'm pretty well off, I'm not rich, but I lay everything out, okay? I'm a millionaire, right? I'm not a 2 millionaire. And if the stock market goes down again, I won't be a millionaire tomorrow, but I'll be like a 0.9 millionaire maybe. But so, you might say, well, he's really rich. I'm like, yeah, because I saved my money all my life, and now I'm living off the income. But I'll also say this. I don't want any more money, and I can do with less. But I can't stand this political whining and wrangling and lying and deceit that's out there. It drives me nuts. It makes me unhappy. And if I didn't have a good sense of humor, if I wasn't a fundamentally happy person, I would literally think that I was living in a miserable world.
Yeah.
So that's what politics does.
Yeah. Well, I've felt that at times in my life.
It's pretty sad, isn't it? We've solved the American problem. We've made everybody miserable. Yeah. Equality for all. There's no inequality here in this America.
Yeah, the American dream.
Yeah, for sure.
Making everybody miserable.
The only thing we're waiting for is the next election, so I can make you as miserable as I already am.
Yeah. I will say one of the things that like I said, I'm a proponent of libertarianism, I support, but one of the things I do question with is like America's overall ability to, because there's a certain sense of personal responsibility you have to have, I think, if you wanted to, like do the things that you're talking about, like, get your 13,000 and then go get a job, like, and that is due to government, a lot of that being due to government, that people don't have that, but that is kind of a problem. You see, like if we were just to say, here's your $13,000, there would be like a ripple effect of, adjustments and bad things happening, so it's understandable how people can be, turned off to it a little bit.
Well, everybody, the old story about the monkey with his hand in the coconut, grabbing a little bit of food out of the inside. And he won't let go of the coconut, but as long as he has the coconut, he can't get his hand out, right? So then the hunter just comes up and now the hunter can run down the monkey because the monkey won't give up the coconut, which is weighting him down. The monkey obviously would be far better off if they just let go of the coconut inside, the little handful of coconut, and pulled his hand out and went up in the tree and gave the hunter the finger. But that's not what the monkey wants to do, and that's not what a lot of people want to do because people are afraid of change. Yeah. Now, I'm blessed to not be afraid of change. Sometimes I hate it, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that it's okay to be different. It's okay to try. It's okay to have your computer program be upgraded when you weren't paying attention, and now you have to learn the new interface. It makes me angry when I have to change my habits. But change is okay, and we live through it, and we change all the time, and we should embrace it, and we should be willing to experiment with things that will work, so we can get rid of all the things that don't work. That's a little bit my point is, if it's not working, let's quit. Because, my background is in business. I never finished my little autobiography.
I was kind of curious, your wealth.
Let me go backwards, okay? Yeah. So I was a long-haired hippie. I became a police officer. They fired me because I wouldn't shave my beard. I'm very proud of that. My chief of police was not the problem, but his mayor was the problem. There was a brand new mayor in town. So if there's a new mayor in town, go get your hair cut. Damn. Yeah. So they fired me because I wouldn't get my beard. I wouldn't cut my beard off, and then I was going to South America, and I'll be perfectly upfront about this too. I had $5,000. I had a red Ford van, and I had a Honda 350 CB, and I was going to South America, and I had $5,000 in my pocket, and my first stop was going to be Colombia. I was going to do a lot of cheap cocaine. At that particular point in time, I'd never done any cocaine, and so I didn't really have any idea what was going to happen when I did some cocaine. But on my first trip, we went overland, like I said, Morocco, Lebanon. Morocco, the keef, which is the pot, right, was, I can't quite remember how much it cost, but I know that by the time we got to Lebanon, we were paying $1 a gram for a good red Lebanese hash.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, that's not a bad deal, right?
Yeah.
Like, how many grams do you want?
Yeah, I think in California, they got a deal like 5 a gram or something.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, by the time we got to Afghanistan, that good black Afghani was 2 cents a gram, okay? I mean, even we were living on $1 a day. But we couldn't smoke up 50 grams of that black Afghani hash. So that was the trail we followed. It was very traditional back then. It's not like I invented this. There was lots of people doing exactly the same thing I was doing. It's like, where are you headed? I'm going east. Anyway, it's like, okay, well, if you want to do drugs and you don't have a lot of money, go where the drugs are. That was basically what we were doing. Yeah. So I was going to go. Can't believe, I know you're not recording any of this, are you? Okay, because if the Republicans and Democrats come after me and they try and take small little snippets of this and use it to crucify me on TV, you know what that means? That means I've won.
Well, you've already come on my podcast, so that was your first mistake right there.
If the Republicans come after me, that means they're afraid of me, and as soon as they're afraid of me, I've won. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the real people out there, they're not afraid of me. They're not. I mean, what am I going to do to them? Okay. Anyway, so I was headed to South America, and that's where the cheap cocaine was. And even though I'd never had any, I thought I'd go where the cheap drugs are. But before I got there, I took a class in auto mechanics at Kirkwood in order to be able to fix my van in case it broke. And during that time, I started a hobby, basically. It was nothing other than a hobby. My wife and I started selling herbs and spices to food co-ops. And that was just like, we were like communists, basically. Food co-ops, communism. Hey, what do you know? That's about the same thing. When I was in Israel for 5 months, lived on a kibbutz too, and that's a collective organization. And so I really loved it. You went to work 6 days a week. You only worked 6 hours a day, and they fed you. They gave you clothes, medical care, a place to sleep. They had a swimming pool. They did your laundry for you. They gave you 5 packs of cigarettes every week too. They were really bad cigarettes. And they gave you all the wine you wanted on Friday nights because it's a Jewish Sabbath, and nobody drank the wine except the volunteers like us. And we only drank it twice before we decided that Lebanese hash was a better deal. Anyway, we started this hobby, and it gradually, over the course of about a year, went from a hobby to where we had to start hiring people. We were selling herbs and spices, only the legal herbs, to natural food stores in Iowa. And then after a year and a half, it was just nothing, right? I mean, it was no work at all. But then the natural food stores in the Midwest started buying from us, like in Madison and Ann Arbor and Chicago. And all of a sudden, we had to start hiring people, and the company just took off. And now it's a cooperative. I didn't own it. My wife didn't own it. We never owned it. We didn't want to own it. We were communists. We started it as a cooperative, and it's still a cooperative. It's still there today. And today it's a $250 million a year cooperative.
Wow.
With 600 employees. When I left in 1999, was only 40 million, and we had 300 employees. So obviously their productivity has increased a lot, and their sales have increased. And you can buy it everywhere in Iowa and all around the United States. Really, every natural food store, almost every supermarket. Frontier Natural Products is the name, and plus we have a bunch of other brand names, or Acacia essential oils. So that's where I got my money. When we started, we worked for free, and then when we tried to hire people at the same wage. Couldn't find anybody. We literally were just begging our friends to come and help us. Some of them did, and then they found excuses why maybe they were not available that day.
Yeah.
So then we started paying people. We started paying people $1 an hour. That's back when minimum wage was $1.50. So we broke the law. But we had this complicated scheme where if we made money every month, then you got a bonus on top of the dollar. And the government caught us, and after about a year or something, and they came in and they said, "Oh no, that's illegal. You can't do that." And we said, "Listen, the bonus is worth more than 50 cents every single month. So you're getting $1 plus you're getting a bonus." "Oh no, that's not legal. You got to do all this back pay." And we're like, "Oh my God." Thanks for your help. Okay,
Yeah.
You really made things easy. But we were very idealistic, and over the course of time, as the business grew, the pay went up. Because in the very beginning, it was $1 an hour for every single person there. We were collective and we all share and all that kind of stuff. And then, it did go up. The government made us pay $1.50, and then we paid $2. And then at a certain point in time, we said, well, people that don't want to be involved in the management of the company, they get paid $1 an hour less or something like that. And pay went up, and over the course of 24 years, I was being paid substantially. But I saved my money from the very first day when I was getting paid $1 an hour. I saved probably at least, I don't know, a quarter of that. Yeah, because, if you're not thinking of the future, then you're not thinking. It's gonna come, okay? I was 25, 26 years old. I wasn't planning on, dying tomorrow, so I'm going to spend all my money today. I've always been a saver.
Yeah.
So I saved money, and when I retired, I had saved enough money that in my 401k and plus some other savings that I have been delightfully unemployed for the last 22 years. Now, when I say unemployed, what I should say is I have not had to work for pay. Okay, I love to work. I just don't need to take in your money. Thank you very much, because I've already got enough of my own. That's what happens if you save your money. And you just invest it. All my money's invested in the stock market and index fund. That's the only thing anybody should do. If you do that for 40 years, then you'll have a lot of money. And if you don't do that, well, you won't have much. Right now, we just guarantee you that you don't have to save your money because we're going to give you a Social Security check when you're 65.
Yeah.
Right? And thank you very much. I want to say one more time, last time, thank you. Thank you for working every day for me. I know I don't deserve it, but I appreciate your efforts. And plus, I think it's also worth going into. It's like, I had the top job at the company, right? I wasn't the person who just got hired and is bagging up the herbs and spices by hand. But it's a very cool company, and we still maintain some of our communist roots. But when we started, we always provided free child care for everybody. That's because there were only two of us, and we had a baby. So one of us worked and the other one took care of the baby. But then when we had to get other people to help, they had babies too. So we took care of everybody's babies, and one person took care of the babies and everyone else worked. And then it became obvious that it would be more efficient if one person, cooked lunch for everybody, and we all ate the lunch. So we did that. We did that for several years, and then as we grew, it became obvious that it would be better if we actually hired somebody to watch the babies, as opposed to okay, I'm going to watch the babies today, and then I'm going to be the financial manager tomorrow. It's I think that when they watched me watch the babies, they said, "You be the financial manager. We'll watch the damn babies." Yeah. Especially cooking. The last time I got to cook, I made a sort of a critical error. It was a tomato-based dish, and I left it on the stove beyond the time at which I should have. And I guess other people don't like eating burned food as much as I do. And after that, they didn't let me cook. But anyway, the company, even today, it has a full-time childcare facility, and there's a sliding scale. But when I was there, you could get childcare for as little as 10 cents an hour, and it was right where you worked. Right, so if you have a new baby. They used to let them bring. It used to be you could bring the baby in the same day because everybody was having babies born at home, and babies are fine. And they don't need 3 days of rest. The hospital needs 3 days of money, but the babies are fine. So I think now the baby has to be 2 weeks old before you can bring him to work. I don't know, but you bring your baby to work, and you leave the baby downstairs. And when the baby wants to be fed, the people that are working in childcare, they say, "Hey, baby wants mama," and mama just sets her stuff aside and goes down and feeds the baby. And when the baby's full, the mama goes back upstairs and works. And you don't keep track of that kind of time. It's like. Who's going to have a baby just so they can get extra break time? Not me. Babies need to nurse. Moms need to nurse the babies. It works, right? And the same thing they have. In fact, I just had lunch out there on Monday, and we still serve lunch, and it's very reasonably priced. It's not free.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's subsidized. It's convenient. It's nutritious. It's good. It's easy for you to eat there. We always thought that it was more fun to be collective than to be individualistic. But here's what the point that people miss: the government never made us do any of this stuff.
Mm.
They didn't pass a minimum number of baby hours law. This is you have to provide childcare in your workplace for 4 hours every day. No. And they never said you have to feed your employees nutritious food. None of that stuff had anything at all to do with government.
Yeah.
That was done because we were trying to do two things. We were trying to get the work done. We were trying to make a profit. And we wanted to be friends with everybody. I want to be friends with the people that are taking care of the babies. I want to be friends with the cook. I want to be friends with the people that are working in bookkeeping and grinding herbs. And I want to be friends with everybody at work.
Yeah.
I don't want to have enemies. It's only in politics that they like to have enemies. And that's why politics is so miserable. Now, I'm not trying to say that all 600 people that work at Frontier are, it's the absolutely best job they've ever had in their life and that they wouldn't give it up for anything. But I can say this, they're good jobs and people love to work there. And sometimes they love to work there, and then they find a better job and they leave. But they still, it's a private initiative. It's the voluntary exchange of labor for money and labor for childcare and labor for food, and it works really well.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a fantastic system. The free market is unbelievable. It's created. We're the richest country in the history of the world by a long shot, and it works. And even China became rich once they went capitalistic. Well, that's what China used to be poor when they were communist, and then they changed to capitalist, and they suddenly made a lot of money. Gee, I wonder what it was.
Yeah.
Could it have been voluntary exchange? Well, maybe we should try that. It is a wonderful system when people can voluntarily exchange with other people, and there's no force involved.
Yeah. Self-evident truth, as they said in Declaration of Independence.
It's absolutely self-evident. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is that sometimes government corrupts that, and they make it appear to be something different. So
exactly.
The government tried to tell. I can't believe this happened, but the government tried to convince me they knew something about COVID. I was like, wow, that's the biggest joke around. Nobody knew anything about COVID. And the government tried to convince.
Right.
Like, when nobody knows anything, and somebody in the government, a politician says, "I know what you should do." I'm like, oh no, now we're in trouble because it's so obvious they had not the slightest clue what to do.
Yeah.
But they've trained people to think that somebody must know what to do. Well, yeah, somebody does. They're called the private. The private market. Somebody did know what to do. Had you ever heard of all these people that invented vaccines? No, but they knew what to do. And I'm not even a vaccine guy. but if you think that government knows how to solve a problem, you're misimagining the nature of the world. Somebody always knows how to solve a problem. If there's not enough oil, somebody figures out how to drill a hole in the ground and get some oil out of it. It's like, would you trust the government to do that?
Yeah.
No, you just can't. You cannot trust the government to do anything, really. And that's why you don't want them to do anything. It's not because they don't have good intentions. They always have good intentions. I'm a person that believes that everybody in the world has good intentions.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying, like the self-evident truth. Like, yeah, like most people in general want good,
The number of what I call truly evil people that I've ever met in my life, personally, is one, and I think the judgment is still out. He must have been okay. I just couldn't figure it out. Right? But yeah, all the people I know that in personal relationships are like, they might be wandering around. They might be different. They might be strange, but they're just trying to do the same thing I'm doing.
Yeah,
they're trying to have a good day.
Yeah, I think it could be even argued that like people who have done bad things had good intentions at one point. Their logic got skewed at one point, and it caused them to start doing malicious things.
And most of that stuff can be pretty much. You can build a fence around that. It's like all men between the ages of 18 and 35. You know, women get a free pass because they're pretty good. Okay,
in terms of that,
they don't do all that stuff that the men do. And the men, after they're 35, you know, their brain has finally reached full maturity, and they're like, oh man, all that crazy stuff I did when I was young. It's like, yep, you sure did. But that's just the point. It's like, we know this. This is not. I'm not making things up. We know who does all the bad stuff. It's men between the ages of 18 and 35. Yeah. So maybe we should figure out something different than taking them when they're 18 and throwing them in prison and saying you can't get out until you're 50. Maybe we need to rethink this. You know, in Norway, somebody was telling me the prisons in Norway look like a college dorm. You know, the prisons in America, they look like the gulag.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. We think. We throw this 18-year-old who, let's just say, you know, like he might have had a gun, he might have fired a couple of shots and stuff, he might have even killed somebody, but to say that this guy now deserves to live in the gulag for the rest of his life because he's done something that's so bad he'll never learn, he'll never be a good person, nothing good will ever come out of it. We're going to lock him up, throw away the key, and you know that's just bizarre. Okay, that's a bizarre 20th century American fantasy. It has nothing whatsoever to do with reality. Because the reality is that when an 18-year-old does something wrong, what we really want to do is we want to minimize what 18-year-olds do. We need a creative outlet for boys between the ages of 18 and 35. And we need to minimize that. And you can minimize that with good government. And the best way to do it is to leave them alone and punish lightly by the community. We punish criminals by Washington, D.C. standards or by Des Moines, Iowa standards. We don't punish people by community standards. And this is why we need to bring back the jury trial. You know, we've completely gone away from it. In the founders' ideas, everybody that got accused of a crime had a jury of your 12 peers, right? And your punishment was determined by what your peers, the people that are just like you, think is the right thing to do. And that's not the way it works anymore. Now we don't have very many jury trials at all. Mostly it's plea bargaining. Prosecutors are good and vicious. We run up just an insane bill with our penitentiaries and our reformatories and our correctional houses. We have more people in prison than anywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. It's not cheap. It costs us an arm and a leg. And there's so many people that are in prison that long since they wouldn't have committed a crime if you let them out 30 days later. You know, imagine this: somebody that sold a little bit of cocaine to somebody, right? Like a friend. Don't forget, if you share some cocaine with your friend, you are now a dealer. Mm-hmm. It's like, whoa, I thought I was just sharing some cocaine. Okay, just clear for the record, right? It's like I have done some cocaine in my life and not very much. I wish I could have done a lot more. No, I'm just joking. It's just not my drug, you know. It's not.
Yeah, I've never partaken personally. I'm not interested.
No, it's like it's not something that is like connected with my personality. Yeah. Liquor is.
Yeah,
okay? Yeah. No, I prefer a little bit of legal liquor for a very simple reason. It makes me more sociable. I know that it looks like maybe I'm sociable now because I'm sort of gregarious. I'm on the radio. I'm talking to my new friend, but actually, in a lot of cases when I'm with strangers, I just clam up. I shut up and put my hands in my pockets. Yeah. So a beer or two or a gin and tonic or two, it lightens me up. I become more sociable. That's my drug. But you wouldn't throw me in prison because I shared a six-pack with a friend. And I don't know why you'd throw somebody in prison if they shared a gram of cocaine with their friend, but that makes them a dealer. And if they got arrested and they got caught with that, and the friend testified against them because somebody's got to go down, then they could have been in for 10 years. That's the American sense of justice. That's just crazy. If it's a bad thing, if cocaine is bad and you shouldn't give it to your friends, okay, and you did, then it's like, well, why don't you spend 6 days in the slammer and think about this? And by the way, we're not going to give you any good food. But that's a relative punishment to the crime. Yeah. But in America, you can spend literally 10 years in prison if you did what I just talked about. Yeah. It's bizarre. It's so out of the realm of reality that I live in that I don't even know what to do about it. But there's a lot of people out there besides me, and they get to vote, and the people that they vote for get to make the rules, and then like I said, then everybody's unhappy.
Yeah. Well, I think the people that think like that, including like citizens, like I think it's just because they're removed from that. They're removed from the idea of like someone doing cocaine. Like to them, that's like such an outwardly thing. Like, oh, they need to be away from it. They need to be in a cell. And yeah, no, that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm a libertarian. Like all drugs should be legalized, 110%. It's awful. I mean, in terms of like, things in the law that are, truly racist, like the war on drugs is one of the ones.
There you go. That's a good one.
One of the big ones. Yeah. That like and that's the thing, like these politicians that, represent these minority groups, none of them end the war on drugs ever. They don't even try,
Have you ever noticed that every U.S. president, after they are not president anymore, magically discovers that the war on drugs was a bad idea? There's something magic happens when you're not the president anymore, and you're smart enough. You must gain 20 IQ points
after the president, not before.
Yeah, just by leaving the office. Because I'm pretty sure that even a person with 20 fewer IQ points could figure out that the war on drugs is a bad idea. But you're the president, you don't figure it out until you're out of office. It's just phenomenal. People don't notice that.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy and all that.
I bet you Putin, after he gets kicked out of office, is going to go, and we shouldn't have had the war on drugs.
Communism wasn't a good idea.
I'm not a real communist. I have $200 billion in gold.
I want to ask you a fun little question. In your experience, what is the worst case you've ever heard for authoritarianism?
The worst case I've ever heard for authoritarianism?
Yeah.
You mean a justification for it?
Yeah, argument, justification.
Well, first of all, I'm going to confess I don't really listen to anybody that says that, so I don't know what they said, but
well, just
no, I haven't got an answer. Usually what it is this they're being authoritarian because it's good for you.
Yeah.
It's this funny thing. They're very frequently they're well intentioned. They're being honest.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be an authoritarian because they're dishonest. They're authoritarian because they literally believe that they know better than you what would be good for you. And they think that they're so convinced of their own value system and their own awareness of reality that they're willing to inflict it on you with force. But they're genuine. They're very genuine. They really honestly believe in something that is worth forcing you to do because you'll be so much happier if you do what I think you should do. And that goes to just about everything. I mean, Putin says that the Ukrainians will be happier if he kills half of them and then rules the other half. And he probably does believe that the Ukrainians will be better off. That's what's amazing. He's not just a crazy loon. He's just wrong. And it's the same sense with everyone else. I'll go away from drugs, okay? Because it's so easy to get there because it's such an obvious.
Yeah.
You should go to college. You should go to college because everything will be better for you if you go to college. In fact, it's so important that you go to college that we should force this guy to pay for it so you can go for free because there should be nothing standing in the way of you in college. That's just an authoritarian thought.
Yeah.
It's fine. Give people advice. I give all my kids advice. You should go to college. And half of them listened. But I didn't force them to go to college. I gave them opportunities to go to college.
Yeah.
And it turned out that for half of them that was a bad idea. But it's the same. It's like that authoritarian instinct. We have it for our children. We are always trying to force our children to do things, and when they're young, it's not that hard because children are pretty gullible. Well, it's like, you can't leave the table until you finish your breakfast or something like that. And they'll go, oh, really? Okay, I'll finish my breakfast. Yeah. And then as they get older, you discover that it's harder and harder to get them to do things that they don't want to do. I love what Henry Ford said one time. He said, if you want your children to do what you want them, wait a second, I might get this wrong. If you want your children to do something that you want them to do, tell them to do what they want to do.
That's good.
So as they get older, then this is life. We go through stages, right? And there's that young age, and then there's that stage of being an adolescent, and going through puberty and being rebellious and wanting to expand the boundaries and have our own personal freedom again, and struggling against our parents. And it's hard, especially in this society where there are so many influences other than the parental influences to be had. But we're all authoritarians at heart, because if we're parents, or if I had a brother or a sister, I always wanted my brother and my sister to do what I told them to do, not what they wanted to do. And then when we get into this idea that the majority rules, 50% plus one gets to tell the minority what to do, then the authoritarianism really jumps out, because we feel justified in telling half the world what they should do, even though they don't want to do it. I'm not a big fan of majority rule. It wouldn't bother me if every single law had to have, 80% before it could pass. Because then at least you're close to a consensus. If 80% of the population is, or let's say 80% of Congress thinks that we should do this, it's not a full consensus, but you're close, right? You're getting to the point where you've convinced 80% of the people. Sometimes they'll still make mistakes. But when you only need 50% plus one to pass a law, you get just an amazing pile of crap laws. Just thousands and thousands of pages. You know how many pages of brand new Iowa code the Iowa legislature adds every year on average?
I can imagine it's astronomical.
It's 163 pages.
Damn.
And now, if you've ever read the Iowa Code, and I used to be a police officer, so I had to read the Iowa Code, and I'm quite familiar with it. When I was a police officer, it was this thick, right? It was like 4 inches thick, the Iowa Code, one book. Mm-hmm. And now it's this big. Now, an easy question: is everybody in Iowa happier now?
Yeah.
Because isn't that what life is about? It's about enjoying life, personal fulfillment.
Yeah, it should be.
Are we that much better? Because I don't see it. I look backwards, and I'm pretty sure that the people that I was a police officer with were pretty happy back then. They were living pretty fulfilling lives, and I was too. And I think that the police officers up here today are also living pretty fulfilling lives, and I am too. So what's the use of the extra 2 feet of laws? How did they make us better off?
It didn't.
People like to say, but life is so much more complicated today. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going to say this on the air, but F you. Life is not complicated. The law is what's complicated.
Yeah.
Most of us are doing exactly the same thing today as we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, for me, 60 years ago. We get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, and we try to have a good day. And we do it in various ways. We go to work, we spend money, we cook meals, we eat together, we talk to our friends, we read books, we read magazines, we watch a little bit of TV, we go to the movies. We're just doing exactly the same thing that everybody did when I was 10 years old. But the government is insisting that they can make our lives better every year by adding 163 pages of laws. That's bizarre. It's inconceivable that a rational person would think that unless we are really better off, we don't need any of those laws. And that's a little bit of the essence of libertarianism. We didn't make things better with these laws. We just made them better for a few people and slightly worse for others. Okay, I can't feel the pain of subsidizing corn farmers in Iowa. It costs me some money. I still do pay. I still pay taxes, even though I mostly just collect yours. But,
yeah.
There's some pain in subsidizing corn farmers. I don't know what it is. They don't send it to me on my bill. My taxes don't say, and throw in an extra $4 to subsidize corn farmers. They just give me one big tax bill. But they give me that tax bill. It's not just corn farmers. There's thousands of instances of that that are in. There's more than thousands. In Iowa, there's 163 new pages of that every year, where they're telling you what you can do, they're telling you what you can't do, they're giving you a tax break here, they're giving you an extra tax there. And we've just created a government which is so complicated that literally no one understands it. So, even the lawyers don't understand it. They only they only study a special little section of the law. A lawyer has to specialize. Nobody can actually know the whole thing. Every time you get a law like that 1,000-page or 2,000-page, everything's 1,000 or 2,000 pages anymore. But what that means is that nobody actually understands the whole thing. Nobody, because it's too big. It's fine print. You have to understand every other law in order. So people just specialize in, like, okay, I know what this section is. I know what this section is. I know what this section is. And then they make a living interpreting that. And when you add the whole thing up, it's a disaster. And it really is a disaster. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, what's amazing is not that government has not done well for us. What's amazing is that people do so well in spite of government. I mean, government has taken 35% of your paycheck, and you're still managing to do okay. You probably have a good day just about every single day, and I have a good day every single day too. So it's amazing that the government hasn't actually ruined our lives. They've made us miserable when we think about government, but they haven't actually ruined our lives, and that's just because human beings are naturally able to navigate in treacherous territories and find personal fulfillment. I find it absolutely remarkable, but I find government absolutely despicable. They just don't do things that are good for everybody. They do things that are good for somebody, and then bad for the rest of us. Yeah,
I think that's like a thing. Like when people are turned off by libertarianism, and they support government, they view like your objection to government as such a bad thing. But it's just because like. I just think they have a hard time seeing it the way that libertarians see it. Is like this. It's even worse when it's a force that is appearing to be good and it's not. It's the complete opposite. I interviewed Mira Mateka. I think that's her last time I pronounced her last name. About a year ago, and she said that when she was involved in government, they would literally just say out up front, like, we're doing this for the tax revenue. Like these things that, quote unquote, help poor people. I mean, it's so blatantly in the face of, the people who are looking and seeing, and then it just seems like there's so many people who just are not. So I don't know. I guess let me ask you this: I know a lot of libertarians have a very positive outlook, but like, I guess what's your outlook on libertarianism and where we're heading in terms of all this?
Well, I think everyone is a libertarian at heart. They just don't understand it. Unfortunately, libertarians are very bad politicians. And if you're a bad politician, then most of the time you're going to get beaten by the good politicians. And the good politicians have mastered the art of the game. Politics is a business. It's not a hobby. It's not something that it's just a business. Okay, a church is a business. Okay, a church has something that they'd like to do, and they need money to do it, and they need customers too. So everything is a business. Okay, yeah. It's not I think it's wonderful. I'm not trying to slam churches. I'm just trying to. The reality is that politics is a business. It's the business of winning elections, and it's the business of winning elections in America with a plurality or a majority of the votes. So Voltaire was right. It's the art of government is taking as much money as possible away from one group and giving it to the other group, and that's what politics is. But you don't get to do that unless you win. So winning elections is the business of politics. Walmart doesn't try and sell to everybody. They understand that there are people that are not their customer base. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody who is a Target customer, for instance. There's just all kinds of people that go, I will never shop at Walmart. Walmart understands this. But they also understand that they have, they also understand that they have customers, and they try and make every one of those customers happy. They don't just try and make the first half of the customers happy. Everybody that walks in that door, Walmart wants them to leave with a purchase. Okay, government doesn't care that way. They only have to get 50% plus one, and they have discovered, politicians have discovered that you can win more elections with fear than you can with love. Mm-hmm. Love might be a strong word, but fear is a very clear word. Politicians get more votes if they scare people, because fear is the greatest human motivator. So they've given up trying to entice you with a carrot, and they just want to scare you with a stick. And one of the ways that I describe this to people, excuse me, I need to
rehydrate.
I need to do some liquid here. 2 years ago when I ran for U.S. Senate, I just collected all the big postcards, the colorful postcards that I received from my two opponents, Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield. And at the end of the year, I'm just cleaning out all this stuff so I can clean up. And I took all those postcards, excuse me, and I divided them up into, these are the ones that Teresa sent me and these are the ones that Joni sent me. Mm-hmm. And then I divided them up into the ones that Teresa sent that were pro-Teresa and the ones that were anti-Joni. And I did the same thing with Joni's, pro-Joni and anti-Teresa. And the ratio was about, for Teresa, if I remember correctly, she sent out 2 pro-Teresa postcards and 17 anti-Joni's. And Joni's were slightly worse. She sent out 2 pro-Joni and 18 anti-Teresa. That you don't really need to know anything else other than that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all you need to know, is that they're using fear because it's a greater motivator to win elections. And I'm sorry, but I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm not afraid of Joni. I'm not afraid of Teresa. I'm not afraid of Joe Biden. I'm not afraid of what was that guy's name? Trump. Yeah, Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
I'm sorry, I'm just not afraid of them, and I refuse to participate in the get somebody to vote for you by scaring them. By making them fearful of the world if you don't vote for me. But that's the art of politics right now. That's exactly what's happening with all of the increase in everything, in communications, in computing power, in analyzing how voters react, in artificial intelligence. They've really refined it to a remarkable degree. It's a fine art of winning, and it involves a lot of hate. And that's why we have so much hate now, is politicians have figured out that's the best way to get elected.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a strange world. I want to end that world. I want to conquer the world with love and humor.
Yeah.
I want everybody in Iowa to say, well, maybe I didn't vote for him, but it would have been fun. And if I'm going to have a beer, I want to have a beer with him. And hopefully my message will get out there, and people will also say, yeah, I'm willing to take a chance with this guy.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
He might have ideas that I've never heard before, and they might sound different, and maybe they're a little bit scary even. But I will ride with this guy. I'll get in his wagon because it can't get any worse than it already is.
I was going to say we as a country have already taken a lot of chances over the last decade or so. So I don't think it's that far-fetched.
How could it be worse?
Yeah.
How could it go worse if we had a libertarian president? I think it wouldn't go worse at all. It'd be an interesting, good experiment. And maybe they'd be bad, right? But we've already seen bad Republican, bad Democrats.
Yeah, well,
let's try a bad libertarian.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the positive case for libertarianism, is it is really hard to imagine. It is really hard to imagine it getting much worse with a bad libertarian candidate. You're right. Rick, we've been talking for a minute here. We're running out of time, but I just wanted to ask you, how can people get involved? You are running for, like I said previously, you're running for governor for Iowa coming up in November. You have my vote.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, what do you want people to know before we wrap up here?
Well, the easy way is just to go to rickstewart.com. If you forget that, then you don't know my name.
Then don't vote.
but if you did know my name and you still forgot that because somewhere or another you failed to join the 20th century, you can just Google. I guess if you know where rickstewart.com is, you probably know how to Google too. But if you just Google Rick Stewart, Iowa sheriff, you'll find all kinds of stuff out about me that will be either entertaining or infuriating. I don't know which one. I think you'll have a good time on that. Of course, politics is really it's two things. Okay, there's only two things I should be doing. I should be asking you for your vote, and I should be asking you for your money. So I'm going to ask your listeners for their vote, and I'm going to ask them for their money, because the more money we have, the more we can spread the word. It's as simple as that. And so if you can throw $5 into the pot, that will be spent very wisely. I guarantee none of it will be wasted in any way, shape, or form. There's not going to be anybody sitting easy and smoking cigars because you contributed to this cause. I'm putting my own money, a fair amount of it, into it, but honestly, my opponents already have. Well, let's just say this: my opponent on the right, the Republican, is sitting on $5 million.
Damn, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and in the last election, she spent 20. In the last election, the Democrat spent 20 million.
Wow.
This year, the Democrat probably won't get anywhere close to that, and the Republican probably won't have to spend that much. But to be perfectly honest, Libertarian candidates traditionally don't raise a lot of money, and I think it's because they don't ask. So we need to ask, and people need to put money in the pot too. It's a little bit like the Bernie thing. You don't have to put a lot in, but a lot of you have to put something in. So put some money in the pot. You can donate on the website and put some money in the pot and think about a recurring donation, because this is the kind of stuff that allows us to plan for the next 8 months of campaigning. And what we'd really like to do is we'd like to spend some money. We'd like to spend some money on some social media and on some TV ads. I guarantee you one thing: you're not going to get any negative ads from me. You're not going to get any, in any way, shape, or form, you're not going to get any negative ads. I'm just not in the business of trying to convince you to be afraid, because I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to be confident and assured and happy. But money does count. So don't think somebody else is going to put the money in. People have to. You have to throw some money in the pot. So do that.
Just make sure if you donate to him, you donate twice as much to the podcast.
And you should donate to the podcast too.
And the podcast.
No, I totally agree. I think it's better if you take your money and divide it up into all the people that are doing good things, than if you try and bet on which one of those good things is going to work, because we don't know what's going to work, right? And it's wiser to spread the money around. And we all have limited funds. Don't be embarrassed to throw $1 into this campaign, because that dollar will be spent well. And I'm sure that $2, twice as much, would be spent well by this podcast too.
Yeah.
So if you want the world to be a different place, you're going to have to do something different, and you're also going to have to pay a little bit for it, because freedom is not free. Freedom has never been free. It never will be free. It has to be fought for, and also it requires money.
Yeah.
So
maybe we can give Molly a raise. Who knows?
Molly looks like she deserves a big raise. So throw some money in the pot.
Hell yeah. Rick, it's been a pleasure.
Hey,
man.
This has been an absolute pleasure. I know I dominated the conversation the whole time.
That's totally
but
fine.
Let me explain why. Okay, every time I told a joke, you laughed at it, and you're the first person who's ever been so amicable. No, I'm just joking. No, it was a great conversation. I loved it, and hopefully I'll come back sometime after the big victory in November, and we'll talk about how libertarians are actually going to govern the state of Iowa instead of just run for office.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll definitely love to have you back around that time, and it's been a pleasure. All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks. You bet.
Peace, everybody. We'll see you next time.